Chapter 11. Wealth does not necessarily produce happiness. D'Artagnan passed through the iron gate and arrived in front of the château. He alighted as he saw a species of giant on the steps. Let us do justice to D'Artagnan. Independently of every selfish wish, his heart palpitated with joy when he saw that tall form and martial demeanor, which recalled to him a good and brave man. He ran to Porthos and threw himself into his arms. The whole body of servants, arranged in a semicircle at a respectful distance, looked on with humble curiosity. Mousqueton, at the head of them, wiped his eyes. Porthos linked his arm in that of his friend. "Ah, how delightful to see you again, dear friend," he cried, in a voice which was now changed from a baritone into a bass. "You've not then forgotten me." "Forget you?" "Though, dear Du Vallon, does one forget the happiest days of flowery youth, one's dearest friends, the dangers we have dared together? On the contrary, there is not an hour we have passed together that is not present to my memory." "Yes, yes," said Porthos, trying to give to his mustache a curl which it had lost whilst he had been alone. "Yes, we did some fine things in our time, and we gave that poor cardinal a few threads to unravel." And he heaved a sigh. "Under any circumstances," he resumed, "you are welcome, my dear friend. You will help me to recover my spirits. Tomorrow we will hunt the hare on my plain, which is a superb tract of land, or pursue the deer in my woods, which are magnificent. I have 4 harriers which are considered the swiftest in the county, and a pack of hounds which are unequaled for 20 leagues around." And Porthos heaved another sigh. "But first," interposed D'Artagnan, "you must present me to Madame du Vallon." A third sigh from Porthos. "I lost Madame du Vallon 2 years ago," he said, "and you find me still in affliction on that account. That was the reason why I left my château du Vallon near Corbeil, and came to my estate, Brescia. Poor Madame du Vallon! Her temper was uncertain, but she came at last to accustom herself to my little ways and understand my little wishes. So you are free now and rich." "Alas," groaned Porthos, "I am a widower and have 40,000 francs a year." "Let us go to breakfast." "I shall be happy to do so. The morning air has made me hungry." "Yes," said Porthos, "my air is excellent." They went into the château. There was nothing but gilding, high and low. The cornices were gilt, the mouldings were gilt, the legs and arms of the chairs were gilt. A table, ready set out, awaited them. "You see," said Porthos, "this is my usual style." "Devil take me," answered D'Artagnan, "I wish you joy of it." "The king has nothing like it." "No," answered Porthos. "I hear it said that he is very badly fed by the cardinal, Monsieur de Mazarin." "Taste this cutlet, my dear D'Artagnan. Tease off one of my sheep." "You have very tender mutton, and I wish you joy of it," said D'Artagnan. "Yes, the sheep are fed in my meadows, which are excellent pasture. Give me another cutlet. No, try this hare, which I had killed yesterday in one of my warrens. Zounds! What a flavor!" cried D'Artagnan. "Ah! They are fed on time only, your hares." "And how do you like my wine?" asked Porthos. "It is pleasant, isn't it?" "Capital. It is nothing, however, but a wine of the country." "Really?" "Yes, a small declivity to the south, yonder on my hill, gives me 20 hogsheads." "Quite a vineyard, hey?" Porthos sighed for the 5th time. D'Artagnan had counted his sighs. He became curious to solve the problem. "Well now," he said, "it seems, my dear friend, that something vexes you. You are ill, perhaps." "That health which—" "Excellent, my dear friend, better than ever." "I could kill an ox with a blow of my fist." "Well then, family affairs, perhaps." "Family. I have, happily, only myself in the world to care for. But what makes you sigh?" "My dear fellow," replied Porthos, "to be candid with you, I am not happy. You are not happy, Porthos. You who have shade, meadows, mountains, woods, you who have 40,000 francs a year, you are not happy. My dear friend, all those things I have, but I am a hermit in the midst of superfluity. Surrounded, I suppose, only by clodhoppers with whom you could not associate." Porthos turned rather pale and drank off a large glass of wine. "No, but just think. There are paltry country squires who have all some title or another and pretend to go back as far as Charlemagne, or at least to Hugh Capet. When I first came here, being the last comer, it was for me to make the first advances. I made them, but you know, my dear friend, Madame du Vallon." Porthos, in pronouncing these words, seemed to gulp down something. Madame du Vallon was of doubtful gentility. She had, in her first marriage, I don't think, D'Artagnan, I am telling you anything new, married a lawyer. They thought that nauseous. You can understand that's a word bad enough to make one kill 30,000 men. I have killed, too, which has made people hold their tongues, but has not made me their friend. So that I have no society, I live alone, I am sick of it, my mind preys on itself. D'Artagnan smiled. He now saw where the breastplate was weak, and prepared the blow. "But now," he said, "that you are a widower, your wife's connection cannot injure you." "Yes, but understand me. Not being of a race of historic fame like the de Courcys, who were content to be plain sirs, or the Rohans, who didn't wish to be dukes, all these people, who are all either vicomte or comtes, go before me at church in all the ceremonies, and I can say nothing to them. Ah, if I only were a baron, don't you mean?" cried D'Artagnan, finishing his friend's sentence. "Ah," cried Porthos, "would I were but a baron! Well, my friend, I am come to give you this very title which you wish for so much." Porthos gave a start that shook the room. 2 or 3 bottles fell and were broken. Mousqueton ran thither, hearing the noise. Porthos waved his hand to Mousqueton to pick up the bottles. "I am glad to see," said D'Artagnan, "that you have still that honest lad with you." "He is my steward," replied Porthos. "He will never leave me." "Go away now, Mouston." "So he's called Mouston," thought D'Artagnan. "'Tis too long a word to pronounce, Mousqueton." "Well," he said aloud, "let us resume our conversation later. Your people may suspect something. There may be spies about." "You can suppose, Porthos, that what I have to say relates to most important matters." "Devil take them. Let us walk in the park," answered Porthos, "for the sake of digestion." "Egad," said D'Artagnan, "the park is like everything else, and there are as many fish in your pond as rabbits in your warren. You are a happy man, my friend, since you have not only retained your love of the chase, but acquired that of fishing." "My friend," replied Porthos, "I leave fishing to Mousqueton. It is a vulgar pleasure, but I shoot sometimes. That is to say, when I am dull and I sit on one of those marble seats, have my gun brought to me, my favorite dog, and I shoot rabbits." "Really, how very amusing." "Yes," replied Porthos with a sigh, "it is amusing." D'Artagnan now no longer counted the sighs. They were innumerable. "However, what had you to say to me?" he resumed. "Let us return to that subject." "With pleasure," replied D'Artagnan. "I must, however, first frankly tell you that you must change your mode of life." "How?" "Go into harness again, gird on your sword, run after adventures, and leave, as in old times, a little of your fat on the roadside." "Ah." "Hang it," said Porthos. "I see you are spoiled, dear friend. You are corpulent. Your arm has no longer that movement of which the late cardinal's guards have so many proofs." "Ah." "My fist is strong enough, I swear," cried Porthos, extending a hand like a shoulder of mutton. "So much the better. Are we then to go to war? By my troth, yes. Against whom? Are you a politician, friend? Not in the least. Are you for Mazarin or for the princes? I am for no one. That is to say, you are for us. Well, I tell you that I come to you from the cardinal. This speech was heard by Porthos in the same sense as if it had still been in the year 1640 and related to the true cardinal. Ho, ho. What are the wishes of his eminence? He wishes to have you in his service. And who spoke to him of me? Rochefort, you remember him. Yes, pardieu, it was he who gave us so much trouble and kept us on the road so much. You gave him 3 sword wounds in 3 separate engagements. But you know he is now our friend. No, I didn't know that. So he cherishes no resentment. You are mistaken, Porthos, said D'Artagnan. It is I who cherish no resentment. Porthos didn't understand any too clearly, but then we know that understanding was not his strong point. You say, then, he continued, that the Count de Rochefort spoke of me to the cardinal. Yes, and the queen, too. The queen, do you say? To inspire us with confidence, she has even placed in Mazarin's hands that famous diamond. You remember all about it, that I once sold to Monsieur des Essarts, and of which, I don't know how, she has regained possession. But it seems to me, said Porthos, that she would have done much better if she had given it back to you. So I think, replied D'Artagnan, but kings and queens are strange beings and have odd fancies. Nevertheless, since they are the ones who have riches and honors, we are devoted to them. Yes, we are devoted to them, repeated Porthos. And you, to whom are you devoted now? To the king, the queen, and to the cardinal. Moreover, I have answered for your devotion also. And you say that you have made certain conditions on my behalf. Magnificent, my dear fellow, magnificent. In the first place, you have plenty of money, haven't you? 40,000 francs income, I think you said. Porthos began to be suspicious. They. My friend, said he, one never has too much money. Madame du Vallon left things in much disorder. I am not much of a hand at figures, so that I live almost from hand to mouth. He is afraid I have come to borrow money, thought D'Artagnan. Ah, my friend, said he, it is all the better if you are in difficulties. How is it all the better? Yes, for his eminence will give you all that you want, land, money, and titles. Ah. Ah. Ah, said Porthos, opening his eyes at that last word. Under the other cardinal, continued D'Artagnan, we didn't know enough to make our profits. This, however, doesn't concern you with your 40,000 francs income, the happiest man in the world, it seems to me. Porthos sighed. At the same time, continued D'Artagnan, notwithstanding your 40,000 francs a year, and perhaps even for the very reason that you have 40,000 francs a year, it seems to me that a little coronet would do well on your carriage, hey? Yes, indeed, said Porthos. Well, my dear friend, win it. It is at the point of your sword. We shall not interfere with each other. Your object is a title, mine money. If I can get enough to rebuild Artagnan, which my ancestors, impoverished by the Crusades, allowed to fall into ruins, and to buy 30 acres of land about it, that is all I wish. I shall retire and die tranquilly at home. For my part, said Porthos, I desire to be made a baron. You shall be one. And have you not seen any of our other friends? Yes, I have seen Aramis. And what does he wish? To be a bishop. Aramis, answered D'Artagnan, who did not wish to undeceive Porthos. Aramis, fancy, has become a monk and a Jesuit and lives like a bear. My offers did not arouse him, did not even tempt him. So much the worse. He was a clever man. And Athos, I have not yet seen him. Do you know where I shall find him? Near Blois. He is called Bragelonne. Only imagine, my dear friend. Athos, who was of as high birth as the emperor, and who inherits one estate which gives him the title of Comte, what is he to do with all those dignities? The Comte de la Fere, Comte de Bragelonne. And he has no children with all these titles. Ah, said Porthos, I have heard that he had adopted a young man who resembles him greatly. What Athos? Our Athos, who is as virtuous as Scipio. Have you seen him? No. Well, I shall see him tomorrow and tell him about you. But I'm afraid, entre nous, that his liking for wine has aged and degraded him. Yes, he used to drink a great deal, replied Porthos. And then he was older than any of us, added D'Artagnan. Some years only. His gravity made him look older than he was. Well then, if we can get Athos, all will be well. If we cannot, we will do without him. We two are worth a dozen. Yes, said Porthos, smiling at the remembrance of his former exploits. But we four altogether would be equal to 36, more especially as you say the work will not be child's play. Will it last long, buyer lady? 2 or 3 years perhaps. So much the better, cried Porthos. You have no idea, my friend, how my bones ache since I came here. Sometimes on a Sunday, I take a ride in the fields and on the property of my neighbors in order to pick up a nice little quarrel, which I am really in want of, but nothing happens. Either they respect or they fear me, which is more likely, but they let me trample down the clover with my dogs, insult and obstruct everyone, and I come back still more weary and low-spirited, that's all. At any rate, tell me, there's more chance of fighting in Paris, is there not? In that respect, my dear friend, it's delightful. No more edicts, no more of the cardinal's guards, no more de Jussac's, nor other bloodhounds. Egad. Underneath a lamp in an inn anywhere, they ask, "Are you one of the Fronde?" They unsheathe, and that's all that is said. The Duc de Guise killed Monsieur de Coligny in the Place Royale, and nothing was said of it. Ah, things go on gaily, then, said Porthos. Besides which, in a short time, resumed D'Artagnan, we shall have set battles, cannonades, conflagrations, and there will be great variety. Well, then, I decide. I have your word, then. Yes, tea's given. I shall fight heart and soul for Mazarin, but he must make me a baron. Zounds, said D'Artagnan, that's settled already. I will be responsible for the barony. On this promise being given, Porthos, who had never doubted his friend's assurance, turned back with him toward the castle. Chapter 12. Porthos was discontented with his condition. As they returned toward the castle, D'Artagnan thought of the miseries of poor human nature, always dissatisfied with what it has, ever desirous of what it has not. In the position of Porthos, D'Artagnan would have been perfectly happy, and to make Porthos contented there was wanting. What? 5 letters to put before his 3 names, a tiny coronet to paint upon the panels of his carriage. I shall pass all my life, thought D'Artagnan, in seeking for a man who is really contented with his lot. Whilst making this reflection, chance seemed, as it were, to give him the lie direct. When Porthos had left him to give some orders, he saw Mousqueton approaching. The face of the steward, despite one slight shade of care, light as a summer cloud, seemed a physiognomy of absolute felicity. Here is what I am looking for, thought D'Artagnan, but alas! The poor fellow does not know the purpose for which I am here. He then made a sign for Mousqueton to come to him. Sir, said the servant, I have a favor to ask you. Speak out, my friend. I am afraid to do so. Perhaps you will think, sir, that prosperity has spoiled me. Art thou happy, friend? Asked D'Artagnan. As happy as possible, and yet, sir, you may make me even happier than I am. Well, speak, if it depends on me. Oh, sir. It depends on you only. I listen, I am waiting to hear. Sir, the favor I have to ask of you is not to call me Mousqueton, but Mouston. Since I have had the honor of being my lord's steward, I have taken the last name as more dignified and calculated to make my inferiors respect me. You, sir, know how necessary subordination is in any large establishment of servants. D'Artagnan smiled. Porthos wanted to lengthen out his names, Mousqueton to cut his short. Well, my dear Mouston, he said, rest satisfied. I will call thee Mouston, and if it makes thee happy, I will not tutor you any longer. Oh, cried Mousqueton, reddening with joy. If you do me, sir, such honor, I shall be grateful all my life. It is too much to ask. Alas, thought D'Artagnan, it is very little to offset the unexpected tribulations I am bringing to this poor devil who has so warmly welcomed me. Will monsieur remain long with us? Asked Mousqueton, with a serene and glowing countenance. I go tomorrow, my friend, replied D'Artagnan. Ah, monsieur, said Mousqueton, then you have come here only to awaken our regrets. I fear that is true, said D'Artagnan in a low tone. D'Artagnan was secretly touched with remorse, not at inducing Porthos to enter into schemes in which his life and fortune would be in jeopardy. For Porthos, in the title of Baron, had his object and reward. But poor Mousqueton, whose only wish was to be called Mouston, was it not cruel to snatch him from the delightful state of peace and plenty in which he was? He was thinking of these matters when Porthos summoned him to dinner. What to dinner? Said D'Artagnan. What time is it then? Why, it is after 1 o'clock. Your home is a paradise, Porthos. One takes no note of time. I follow you, though I am not hungry. Come, if one can't always eat, one can always drink. A maxim of poor Athos, the truth of which I have discovered since I began to be lonely. D'Artagnan, who as a Gascon was inclined to sobriety, seemed not so sure as his friend of the truth of Athos's maxim, but he did his best to keep up with his host. Meanwhile, his misgivings in regard to Mousqueton recurred to his mind, and with greater force because Mousqueton, though he did not himself wait on the table, which would have been beneath him in his new position, appeared at the door from time to time, and evinced his gratitude to D'Artagnan by the quality of the wine he directed to be served. Therefore, when at dessert, upon a sign from D'Artagnan, Porthos had sent away his servants and the two friends were alone. Porthos, said D'Artagnan, who will attend you in your campaigns? Why, replied Porthos, Mouston, of course. This was a blow to D'Artagnan. He could already see the intendant's beaming smile change to a contortion of grief. But, he said, Mouston is not so young as he was, my dear fellow. Besides, he has grown fat and perhaps has lost his fitness for active service. That may be true, replied Porthos, but I am used to him, and besides, he wouldn't be willing to let me go without him. He loves me so much. Oh, blind self-love, thought D'Artagnan. And you, asked Porthos, haven't you still in your service your old lackey, that good, that brave, that intelligent? What, then, is his name? Planchet, yes, I have found him again, but he is lackey no longer. What is he, then? With his 1,600 francs, you remember, the 1,600 francs he earned at the siege of La Rochelle by carrying a letter to Lord de Winter. He has set up a little shop in the Rue des Lombards and is now a confectioner. Ah, he is a confectioner in the Rue des Lombards. How does it happen, then, that he is in your service? He has been guilty of certain escapades and fears he may be disturbed. And the musketeer narrated to his friend Planchet's adventure. Well, said Porthos, if anyone had told you in the old times that the day would come when Planchet would rescue Rochefort and that you would protect him in it, I should not have believed him, but men are changed by events. There is nothing truer than that, said Porthos, but what does not change or changes for the better is wine. Taste of this. It is a Spanish wine which our friend Athos thought much of. At that moment, the steward came in to consult his master upon the proceedings of the next day, and also with regard to the shooting party which had been proposed. Tell me, Mouston, said Porthos, "are my arms in good condition?" "Your arms, my lord, what arms?" "Zounds." "My weapons." "What weapons?" "My military weapons." "Yes, my lord, at any rate I think so." "Make sure of it, and if they want it, have them burnished up." "Which is my best cavalry horse?" "Vulcan." "And the best hack?" "Bayard." "What horse dost thou choose for thyself?" "I like Rustad, my lord, a good animal whose paces suit me." "Strong, thinkest thou?" "Half Norman, half Mecklenburger will go night and day." "That will do for us." "See to these horses." "Polish up, or make someone else polish my arms." "Then take pistols with thee and a hunting knife." "Are we then going to travel, my lord?" asked Mousqueton, rather uneasy. "Something better still, Mouston." "An expedition, sir?" asked the steward, whose roses began to change into lilies. "We are going to return to the service, Mouston," replied Porthos, still trying to restore his mustache to the military curl it had long lost. "Into the service, the king's service." Mousqueton trembled. Even his fat, smooth cheeks shook as he spoke, and he looked at D'Artagnan with an air of reproach. He staggered, and his voice was almost choked. "Yes and no. We shall serve in a campaign, seek out all sorts of adventures, return, in short, to our former life." These last words fell on Mousqueton like a thunderbolt. It was those very terrible old days that made the present so excessively delightful, and the blow was so great he rushed out, overcome, and forgot to shut the door. The two friends remained alone to speak of the future and to build castles in the air. The good wine which Mousqueton had placed before them traced out in glowing drops to D'Artagnan a fine perspective, shining with quadruples and pistoles, and showed to Porthos a blue ribbon and a ducal mantle. They were, in fact, asleep on the table when the servants came to light them to their bed. Mousqueton was, however, somewhat consoled by D'Artagnan, who the next day told him that in all probability war would always be carried on in the heart of Paris and within reach of the Château du Vallon, which was near Corbel, or Bracia, which was near Melun, and of Pierrefonds, which was between Campigny and Villers-Cotterets. "But formerly, it appears," began Mousqueton timidly. "Oh," said D'Artagnan, "we don't now make war as we did formerly. Today it's a sort of diplomatic arrangement. Ask Planchet." Mousqueton inquired, therefore, the state of the case of his old friend, who confirmed the statement of D'Artagnan. "But," he added, "in this war prisoners stand a chance of being hung." "The deuce they do," said Mousqueton. "I think I should like the siege of Rochelle better than this war, then." Porthos, meantime, asked D'Artagnan to give him his instructions how to proceed on his journey. 4 days, replied his friend, are necessary to reach Blois, 1 day to rest there, 3 or 4 days to return to Paris. Set out, therefore, in a week with your suite, and go to the Hôtel de la Chevrette, Rue Tiquetonne, and there await me. That is agreed, said Porthos. As to myself, I shall go around to see Athos, for though I don't think his aid worth much, one must with one's friends observe all due politeness, said D'Artagnan. The friends then took leave of each other on the very border of the estate of Pierrefonds, to which Porthos escorted his friend. At least, D'Artagnan said to himself, as he took the road to Villers-Cotterets, at least I shall not be alone in my undertaking. That devil, Porthos, is a man of prodigious strength. Still, if Athos joins us, well, we shall be 3 of us to laugh at Aramis, that little coxcomb with his too good luck. At Villers-Cotterets he wrote to the cardinal, My lord, I have already 1 man to offer to your eminence, and he is well worth 20 men. I am just setting out for Blois. The Comte de la Fere inhabits the castle of Bragelonne, in the environs of that city. Chapter 13. two angelic faces. The road was long, but the horses upon which D'Artagnan and Planchet rode had been refreshed in the well-supplied stables of the Lord of Bracia. The master and servant rode, side by side, conversing as they went, for D'Artagnan had by degrees thrown off the master, and Planchet had entirely ceased to assume the manners of a servant. He had been raised, by circumstances, to the rank of a confidant to his master. It was many years since D'Artagnan had opened his heart to anyone. It happened, however, that these two men, on meeting again, assimilated perfectly. Planchet was in truth no vulgar companion in these new adventures. He was a man of uncommonly sound sense. Without courting danger, he never shrank from an encounter. In short, he had been a soldier and arms ennoble a man. It was, therefore, on the footing of friends that D'Artagnan and Planchet arrived in the neighborhood of Blois. Going along, D'Artagnan, shaking his head, said, "I know that my going to Athos is useless and absurd, but still I owe this courtesy to my old friend, a man who had in him material for the most noble and generous of characters." "Oh, Monsieur Athos was a noble gentleman," said Planchet. "Was he not?" "Scattering money round about him, as heaven sprinkles rain." "Do you remember, sir, that duel with the Englishman in the enclosure des Carmes?" "Ah, how lofty, how magnificent Monsieur Athos was that day, when he said to his adversary, 'You have insisted on knowing my name, sir, so much the worse for you, since I shall be obliged to kill you.' I was near him, those were his exact words, when he stabbed his foe as he said he would, and his adversary fell without saying, 'Oh, 'tis a noble gentleman, Monsieur Athos.'" "Yes, true as gospel," said D'Artagnan, "but one single fault has swallowed up all these fine qualities." "I remember well," said Planchet. "He was fond of drinking. In truth, he drank, but not as other men drink." One seemed, as he raised the wine to his lips, to hear him say, "Come, juice of the grape, and chase away my sorrows," and how he used to break the stem of a glass or the neck of a bottle. There was no one like him for that. "And now," replied D'Artagnan, "behold the sad spectacle that awaits us. This noble gentleman with his lofty glance, this handsome cavalier, so brilliant in feats of arms that everyone was surprised that he held in his hand a sword, only instead of a baton of command. Alas, we shall find him changed into a broken-down old man, with garnet nose and eyes that slobber. We shall find him extended on some lawn, whence he will look at us with a languid eye and peradventure will not recognize us. God knows, Planchet, that I should fly from a sight so sad if I did not wish to show my respect for the illustrious shadow of what was once the Comte de la Fere, whom we loved so much." Planchet shook his head and said nothing. It was evident that he shared his master's apprehensions. "And then," resumed D'Artagnan, "to this decrepitude is probably added poverty, for he must have neglected the little that he had, and the dirty scoundrel, Grimaud, more taciturn than ever and still more drunken than his master. Stay, Planchet, it breaks my heart to merely think of it. I fancy myself there, and that I see him staggering and hear him stammering," said Planchet, in a piteous tone. "But at all events we shall soon know the real state of things, for I imagine that those lofty walls, now turning ruby in the setting sun, are the walls of Blois. Probably, and those steeples, pointed and sculptured, that we catch a glimpse of yonder, are similar to those that I have heard described at Chambord." At this moment, one of those heavy wagons, drawn by bullocks, which carry the wood cut in the fine forests of the country to the ports of the Loire, came out of a by-road full of ruts and turned on that which the two horsemen were following. A man carrying a long switch with a nail at the end of it, with which he urged on his slow team, was walking with the cart. "Ho, friend," cried Planchet. "What's your pleasure, gentlemen?" replied the peasant, with a purity of accent peculiar to the people of that district, and which might have put to shame the cultured denizens of the Sorbonne and the Rue de l'Université. "We are looking for the house of Monsieur de la Fère," said D'Artagnan. The peasant took off his hat on hearing this revered name. "Gentlemen," he said, "the wood that I am carting is his. I cut it in his copse, and I am taking it to the Chateau." D'Artagnan determined not to question this man. He did not wish to hear from another what he had himself said to Planchet. "The Chateau," he said to himself. "What Chateau?" "Ah, I understand. Athos is not a man to be thwarted. He, like Porthos, has obliged his peasantry to call him my lord, and to dignify his pettifogging place by the name of Chateau. He had a heavy hand, dear old Athos, after drinking." D'Artagnan, after asking the man the right way, continued his route, agitated in spite of himself at the idea of seeing once more that singular man whom he had so truly loved, and who had contributed so much by advice and example to his education as a gentleman. He checked by degrees the speed of his horse and went on, his head drooping as if in deep thought. Soon as the road turned, the Château de la Vallière appeared in view. Then, a quarter of a mile beyond, a white house, encircled in sycamores, was visible at the farther end of a group of trees, which spring had powdered with a snow of flowers. On beholding this house, D'Artagnan, calm as he was in general, felt an unusual disturbance within his heart. So powerful during the whole course of life are the recollections of youth. He proceeded, nevertheless, and came opposite to an iron gate, ornamented in the taste of the period. Through the gate was seen kitchen gardens, carefully attended to, a spacious courtyard, in which neighed several horses held by valets in various liveries, and a carriage drawn by 2 horses of the country. "We are mistaken," said D'Artagnan. "This cannot be the establishment of Athos. Good heavens! Suppose he is dead, and that this property now belongs to someone who bears his name. Alight, Planchet, and inquire, for I confess that I have scarcely courage so to do." Planchet alighted. "Thou must add," said D'Artagnan, "that a gentleman who is passing by wishes to have the honor of paying his respects to the Comte de la Fère, and if thou art satisfied with what thou hearest, then mention my name." Planchet, leading his horse by the bridle, drew near to the gate and rang the bell, and immediately a servant man with white hair and of erect stature, notwithstanding his age, presented himself. "Does Monsieur le Comte de la Fère live here?" asked Planchet. "Yes, monsieur, it is here he lives," the servant replied to Planchet, who was not in livery. "A nobleman retired from service, is he not?" "Yes, and who had a lackey named Grimaud," persisted Planchet, who had prudently considered that he couldn't have too much information. "Monsieur Grimaud is absent from the Chateau for the time being," said the servitor, who, little used as he was to such inquiries, began to examine Planchet from head to foot. "Then," cried Planchet joyously, "I see well that it is the same Comte de la Fère whom we seek. Be good enough to open to me, for I wish to announce to Monsieur le Comte that my master, one of his friends, is here and wishes to greet him." "Why didn't you say so?" said the servitor, opening the gate. "But where is your master?" "He is following me." The servitor opened the gate and walked before Planchet, who made a sign to D'Artagnan. The latter, his heart palpitating more than ever, entered the courtyard without dismounting. Whilst Planchet was standing on the steps before the house, he heard a voice say, "Well, where is this gentleman, and why do they not bring him here?" This voice, the sound of which reached D'Artagnan, reawakened in his heart 1,000 sentiments, 1,000 recollections that he had forgotten. He vaulted hastily from his horse, whilst Planchet, with a smile on his lips, advanced toward the master of the house. "But I know you, my lad," said Athos, appearing on the threshold. "Oh, yes, Monsieur le Comte, you know me and I know you. I am Planchet, whom you know well." But the honest servant could say no more, so much was he overcome by this unexpected interview. "What Planchet is Monsieur d'Artagnan here? Here I am, my friend, dear Athos," cried D'Artagnan, in a faltering voice and almost staggering from agitation. At these words, a visible emotion was expressed on the beautiful countenance and calm features of Athos. He rushed toward D'Artagnan with eyes fixed upon him and clasped him in his arms. D'Artagnan, equally moved, pressed him also closely to him, whilst tears stood in his eyes. Athos then took him by the hand and led him into the drawing-room, where there were several people. Everyone arose. "I present to you," he said, "Monsieur le Chevalier d'Artagnan, lieutenant of His Majesty's Musketeers, a devoted friend, and one of the most excellent, brave gentlemen that I have ever known." D'Artagnan received the compliments of those who were present in his own way, and whilst the conversation became general, he looked earnestly at Athos. Strange, Athos was scarcely aged at all. His fine eyes, no longer surrounded by that dark line which nights of dissipation penciled too infallibly, seemed larger, more liquid than ever. His face, a little elongated, had gained in calm dignity what it had lost in feverish excitement. His hand, always wonderfully beautiful and strong, was set off by a ruffle of lace, like certain hands by Titian and Van Dyck. He was less stiff than formerly. His long, dark hair, softly powdered here and there with silver tendrils, fell elegantly over his shoulders in wavy curls. His voice was still youthful, as if belonging to a Hercules of 25, and his magnificent teeth, which he had preserved white and sound, gave an indescribable charm to his smile. Meanwhile the guests, seeing that the two friends were longing to be alone, prepared to depart, when a noise of dogs barking resounded through the courtyard, and many persons said at the same moment, "Ah, 'tis Raoul, who is come home." Athos, as the name of Raoul was pronounced, looked inquisitively at D'Artagnan, in order to see if any curiosity was painted on his face. But D'Artagnan was still in confusion and turned around almost mechanically when a fine young man of 15 years of age, dressed simply, but in perfect taste, entered the room, raising, as he came, his hat, adorned with a long plume of scarlet feathers. Nevertheless, D'Artagnan was struck by the appearance of this new personage. It seemed to explain to him the change in Athos. A resemblance between the boy and the man explained the mystery of this regenerated existence. He remained listening and gazing. "Here you are home again, Raoul," said the Comte. "Yes, sir," replied the youth with deep respect, "and I have performed the commission that you gave me." "But what's the matter, Raoul?" said Athos very anxiously. "You are pale and agitated." "Sir," replied the young man, "it is on account of an accident which has happened to our little neighbor." "To Mademoiselle de la Vallière?" asked Athos quickly. "What is it?" cried many persons present. "She was walking with her nurse Marceline, in the place where the woodmen cut the wood, when, passing on horseback, I stopped. She saw me also, and in trying to jump from the end of a pile of wood on which she had mounted, the poor child fell and was not able to rise again. I fear that she has badly sprained her ankle." "Oh, heavens!" cried Athos. "And her mother, Madame de Saint-Remy, have they yet told her of it?" "No, sir. Madame de Saint-Remy is at Blois with the Duchess of Orleans." "I am afraid that what was first done was unskillful, if not worse than useless. I am come, sir, to ask your advice. Send directly to Blois, Réal, or rather take horse and ride immediately yourself. Réal bowed. But where is Louise? Asked the Comte. I have brought her here, sir, and I have deposited her in charge of Charlotte, who, till better advice comes, has bathed the foot in cold well water. The guests now all took leave of Athos, excepting the old Duc de Barbe, who, as an old friend of the family of La Vallière, went to see little Louise and offered to take her to Blois in his carriage. You are right, sir, said Athos. She will be the sooner with her mother. As for you, Réal, I am sure it is your fault, some giddiness or folly. No, sir, I assure you, muttered Réal, it is not. Oh, no, no, I declare it is not, cried the young girl, while Réal turned pale at the idea of his being perhaps the cause of her disaster. Nevertheless, Réal, you must go to Blois and you must make your excuses and mine to Madame de Saint-Remy. The youth looked pleased. He again took in his strong arms the little girl, whose pretty golden head and smiling face rested on his shoulder, and placed her gently in the carriage, then jumping on his horse with the elegance of a first-rate esquire. After bowing to Athos and D'Artagnan, he went off close by the door of the carriage, on somebody inside of which his eyes were riveted. Chapter 14. The Castle of Bragelonne. Whilst this scene was going on, D'Artagnan remained with open mouth and a confused gaze. Everything had turned out so differently from what he expected that he was stupefied with wonder. Athos, who had been observing him and guessing his thoughts, took his arm and led him into the garden. Whilst supper is being prepared, he said, smiling, you will not, my friend, be sorry to have the mystery which so puzzles you cleared up. True, Monsieur le Comte, replied D'Artagnan, who felt that by degrees Athos was resuming that great influence which aristocracy had over him. Athos smiled. First and foremost, dear D'Artagnan, we have no title such as Count here. When I call you Chevalier, it is in presenting you to my guests that they may know who you are. But to you, D'Artagnan, I am, I hope, still dear Athos, your comrade, your friend. Do you intend to stand on ceremony, because you are less attached to me than you were? Oh, God forbid. Then let us be as we used to be. Let us be open with each other. You are surprised at what you see here? Extremely. But above all things, I am a marvel to you. I confess it. I am still young, am I not? Should you not have known me again, in spite of my 40 years of age? On the contrary, I do not find you the same person at all. I understand, cried Athos, with a gentle blush. Everything, D'Artagnan, even folly, has its limit. Then your means, it appears, are improved. You have a capital house, your own, I presume. You have a park and horses, servants. Athos smiled. Yes, I inherited this little property when I quitted the army, as I told you. The park is 20 acres, 20, comprising kitchen gardens and a common. I have 2 horses. I do not count my servant's bob-tailed nag. My sporting dogs consist of 2 pointers, 2 harriers, and 2 setters. But then all this extravagance is not for myself, added Athos, laughing. Yes, I see, for the young man Réal, said D'Artagnan. You guess aright, my friend. This youth is an orphan, deserted by his mother, who left him in the house of a poor country priest. I have brought him up. It is Réal who has worked in me the change you see. I was dried up like a miserable tree, isolated, attached to nothing on earth. It was only a deep affection that could make me take root again and drag me back to life. This child has caused me to recover what I had lost. I had no longer any wish to live for myself. I have lived for him. I have corrected the vices that I had. I have assumed the virtues that I had not. Precept something, but example more. I may be mistaken, but I believe that Raoul will be as accomplished a gentleman as our degenerate age could display. The remembrance of Milady recurred to D'Artagnan. "And you are happy," he said to his friend. "As happy as it is allowed to one of God's creatures to be on this earth. But say out all you think, D'Artagnan, for you have not yet done so." "You are too bad, Athos. One can hide nothing from you," answered D'Artagnan. "I wish to ask you if you ever feel any emotions of terror resembling remorse." "I finish your phrase. Yes and no." "I do not feel remorse, because that woman, I profoundly hold, deserved her punishment." "Had she one redeeming trait?" "I doubt it." "I do not feel remorse, because had we allowed her to live, she would have persisted in her work of destruction." "But I do not mean, my friend, that we were right in what we did. Perhaps all blood demands some expiation. Hers had been accomplished. It remains, possibly, for us to accomplish ours. I have sometimes thought as you do, Athos. She had a son, that unhappy woman. Yes. Have you ever heard of him? Never. He must be about 23 years of age," said Athos in a low tone. "I often think of that young man, D'Artagnan. Strained." "For I had forgotten him," said the lieutenant. Athos smiled. The smile was melancholy. "And Lord de Winter, do you know anything about him?" "I know that he is in high favor with Charles I. The fortunes of that monarch now are at low water." "He shed the blood of Strafford. That confirms what I said just now. Blood will have blood." "And the Queen? What Queen?" "Madame Henrietta of England, daughter of Henry IV. She is at the Louvre, as you know." "Yes, and I hear in bitter poverty." "Her daughter, during the severest cold, was obliged for want of fire to remain in bed." "Do you grasp that?" said Athos, shrugging his shoulders. "The daughter of Henry IV. Shivering for want of a faggot. Why did she not ask from any one of us a home, instead of from Mazarin?" "She should have wanted nothing. Have you ever seen the Queen of England?" inquired D'Artagnan. "No, but my mother as a child saw her." "Did I ever tell you that my mother was lady of honor to Marie de Medici?" "Never." "You know, Athos, you never spoke much of such matters." "Ah, mon Dieu, yes, you are right," Athos replied. "But then there must be some occasion for speaking." "Porthos wouldn't have waited for it so patiently," said D'Artagnan with a smile. "Every one according to his nature, my dear D'Artagnan. Porthos, in spite of a touch of vanity, has many excellent qualities." "Have you seen him?" "I left him 5 days ago," said D'Artagnan, and he portrayed with Gascon wit and sprightliness the magnificence of Porthos in his shade of Pierrefonds. Nor did he neglect to launch a few arrows of wit at the excellent Monsieur Mouston. "I sometimes wonder," replied Athos, smiling at that gaiety which recalled the good old days, "that we could form an association of men who would be, after 20 years of separation, still so closely bound together. Friendship throws out deep roots in honest hearts, D'Artagnan. Believe me, it is only the evil-minded who deny friendship. They cannot understand it." "And Aramis? I have seen him also," said D'Artagnan, "but he seemed to me cold." "Ah, you have seen Aramis," said Athos, turning on D'Artagnan a searching look. "Why, it is a veritable pilgrimage, my dear friend, that you are making to the temple of friendship, as the poets would say." "Why, yes," replied D'Artagnan, with embarrassment. "Aramis, you know," continued Athos, "is naturally cold, and then he is always involved in intrigues with women." "I believe he is at this moment in a very complicated one," said D'Artagnan. Athos made no reply. "He is not curious," thought D'Artagnan. Athos not only failed to reply, He even changed the subject of conversation. "You see," said he, calling D'Artagnan's attention to the fact that they had come back to the chateau after an hour's walk, "we have made a tour of my domains." "All is charming and everything savors of nobility," replied D'Artagnan. At this instant, they heard the sound of horses' feet. "'Tis Raoul who has come back," said Athos, "and we can now hear how the poor child is." In fact, the young man appeared at the gate, covered with dust, entered the courtyard, leaped from his horse, which he consigned to the charge of a groom, and then went to greet the Count and D'Artagnan. "Monsieur," said Athos, placing his hand on D'Artagnan's shoulder, "Monsieur is the Chevalier D'Artagnan of whom you have often heard me speak, Raoul." "Monsieur," said the young man, saluting again and more profoundly, "Monsieur le Comte has pronounced your name before me as an example whenever he wished to speak of an intrepid and generous gentleman." That little compliment could not fail to move D'Artagnan. He extended a hand to Raoul and said, "My young friend, all the praises that are given me should be passed on to the Count here, for he has educated me in everything, and it is not his fault that his pupil profited so little from his instructions. But he will make it up in you, I am sure. I like your manner, Raoul, and your politeness has touched me." Athos was more delighted than can be told. He looked at D'Artagnan with an expression of gratitude, and then bestowed on Raoul one of those strange smiles, of which children are so proud when they receive them. "Now," said D'Artagnan to himself, noticing that silent play of countenance, "I am sure of it. I hope the accident has been of no consequence. They don't yet know, sir, on account of the swelling, but the doctor is afraid some tendon has been injured." At this moment, a little boy, half peasant, half footboy, came to announce supper. Athos led his guest into a dining room of moderate size, the windows of which opened on one side on a garden, on the other on a hot house full of magnificent flowers. D'Artagnan glanced at the dinner service. The plate was magnificent, old, and appertaining to the family. D'Artagnan stopped to look at a sideboard on which was a superb ewer of silver. "That workmanship is divine," he exclaimed. "Yes, a chef d'oeuvre of the great Florentine sculptor, Benvenuto Cellini," replied Athos. "What battle does it represent?" "That of Marignan, just at the point where one of my forefathers is offering his sword to Francis I, who has broken his. It was on that occasion that my ancestor, Enguerrand de la Fere, was made a knight of the Order of St. Michael, besides which, the king, 15 years afterward, gave him also this ewer and a sword which you may have seen formerly in my house, also a lovely specimen of workmanship." "Men were giants in those times," said Athos. "Now we are pygmies in comparison. Let us sit down to supper. Call Charles," he added, addressing the boy who waited. "My good Charles, I particularly recommend to your care Planchet the likewise of Monsieur D'Artagnan. He likes good wine. Now you have the key of the cellar. He has slept a long time on a hard bed, so he won't object to a soft one. Take every care of him, I beg of you." Charles bowed and retired. "You think of everything," said D'Artagnan, "and I thank you for Planchet, my dear Athos." Raoul stared on hearing this name and looked at the Count to be quite sure that it was he whom the lieutenant thus addressed. "That name sounds strange to you," said Athos, smiling. "It was my nom de guerre when Monsieur D'Artagnan, 2 other gallant friends and myself performed some feats of arms at the siege of La Rochelle, under the deceased Cardinal and Monsieur de Bassompierre. My friend is still so kind as to address me by that old and well-beloved appellation, which makes my heart glad when I hear it. 'Tis an illustrious name," said the lieutenant, "and had one day triumphal honors paid to it." "What do you mean, sir?" inquired Raoul. "You have not forgotten Saint. Gervais, Athos, and the napkin which was converted into a banner. And he then related to Raoul the story of the bastion, and Raoul fancied he was listening to one of those deeds of arms belonging to days of chivalry, so gloriously recounted by Tasso and Ariosto. "D'Artagnan does not tell you, Raoul," said Athos in his turn, "that he was reckoned one of the finest swordsmen of his time, a knuckle of iron, a wrist of steel, a sure eye and a glance of fire. That's what his adversary met with. He was 18, only 3 years older than you are, Raoul, when I saw him set to work, pitted against tried men." "And did Monsieur d'Artagnan come off the conqueror?" asked the young man with glistening eye. "I killed one man, if I recollect rightly," replied D'Artagnan, with a look of inquiry directed to Athos. "Another I disarmed or wounded, I don't remember which." "Wounded," said Athos. "It was a phenomenon of skill." The young man would willingly have prolonged this conversation far into the night, but Athos pointed out to him that his guest must need repose. D'Artagnan would fain have declared that he was not fatigued, but Athos insisted on his retiring to his chamber, conducted thither by Raoul. Chapter 15. Athos as a diplomatist. D'Artagnan retired to bed, not to sleep, but to think over all he had heard that evening. Being naturally good-hearted, and having had once a liking for Athos, which had grown into a sincere friendship, he was delighted at thus meeting a man full of intelligence and moral strength, instead of a drunkard. He admitted without annoyance the continued superiority of Athos over himself, devoid as he was of that jealousy which might have saddened a less generous disposition. He was delighted also that the high qualities of Athos appeared to promise favorably for his mission. Nevertheless, it seemed to him that Athos was not in all respects sincere and frank. Who was the youth he had adopted, and who bore so striking a resemblance to him? What could explain Athos, having re-entered the world, and the extreme sobriety he had observed at table? The absence of Grimaud, whose name had never once been uttered by Athos, gave D'Artagnan uneasiness. It was evident either that he no longer possessed the confidence of his friend, or that Athos was bound by some invisible chain, or that he had been forewarned of the lieutenant's visit. He could not help thinking of M. Rochefort, whom he had seen in Notre Dame. Could de Rochefort have forestalled him with Athos? Again, the moderate fortune which Athos possessed, concealed as it was, so skillfully, seemed to show a regard for appearances, and to betray a latent ambition which might be easily aroused. The clear and vigorous intellect of Athos would render him more open to conviction than a less able man would be. He would enter into the minister's schemes with the more ardor, because his natural activity would be doubled by necessity. Resolved to seek an explanation on all these points on the following day, D'Artagnan, in spite of his fatigue, prepared for an attack and determined that it should take place after breakfast. He determined to cultivate the goodwill of the youth Raoul, and, either whilst fencing with him or when out shooting, to extract from his simplicity some information which would connect the Athos of old times with the Athos of the present. But D'Artagnan, at the same time, being a man of extreme caution, was quite aware what injury he should do himself, if by any indiscretion or awkwardness he should betray his maneuvering to the experienced eye of Athos. Besides, to tell truth, whilst D'Artagnan was quite disposed to adopt a subtle course against the cunning of Aramis or the vanity of Porthos, he was ashamed to equivocate with Athos, true-hearted, open Athos. It seemed to him that, if Porthos and Aramis deemed him superior to them in the arts of diplomacy, they would like him all the better for it, but that Athos, on the contrary, would despise him. Ah, why is not Grimaud, the taciturn Grimaud, here? Thought D'Artagnan. There are so many things his silence would have told me. With Grimaud's silence was another form of eloquence. There reigned a perfect stillness in the house. D'Artagnan had heard the door shut and the shutters barred. The dogs became in their turn silent. At last a nightingale, lost in a thicket of shrubs, in the midst of its most melodious cadences, had fluted low and lower into stillness and fallen asleep. Not a sound was heard in the castle, except of a footstep up and down, in the chamber above, as he supposed, the bedroom of Athos. He is walking about and thinking, thought D'Artagnan, but of what? It is impossible to know. Everything else might be guessed, but not that. At length Athos went to bed, apparently, for the noise ceased. Silence and fatigue together overcame D'Artagnan, and sleep overtook him also. He was not, however, a good sleeper. Scarcely had dawn gilded his window curtains when he sprang out of bed and opened the windows. Somebody, he perceived, was in the courtyard, moving stealthily. True to his custom of never passing anything over that it was within his power to know, D'Artagnan looked out of the window and perceived the close red coat and brown hair of Réal. The young man was opening the door of the stable. He then, with noiseless haste, took out the horse that he had ridden on the previous evening, saddled and bridled it himself, and led the animal into the alley to the right of the kitchen garden, opened a side door which conducted him to a bridle road, shut it after him, and D'Artagnan saw him pass by like a dart, bending, as he went, beneath the pendant flowery branches of maple and acacia. The road, as D'Artagnan had observed, was the way to Blois. So, thought the Gascon, here's a young blade who has already his love affair, who doesn't at all agree with Athos in his hatred to the fair sex. He's not going to hunt, for he has neither dogs nor arms. He's not going on a message, for he goes secretly. Why does he go in secret? Is he afraid of me or of his father? For I am sure the Count is his father. By Jove! I shall know about that soon, for I shall soon speak out to Athos. Day was now advanced. All the noises that had ceased the night before reawakened, one after the other. The bird on the branch, the dog in his kennel, the sheep in the field, the boats moored in the Loire even became alive and vocal. The latter, leaving the shore, abandoned themselves gaily to the current. The Gascon gave a last twirl to his mustache, a last turn to his hair, brushed, from habit, the brim of his hat with the sleeve of his doublet, and went downstairs. Scarcely had he descended the last step of the threshold when he saw Athos bent down toward the ground, as if he were looking for a crown-piece in the dust. "Good morning, my dear host," cried D'Artagnan. "Good day to you. Have you slept well?" "Excellently, Athos, but what are you looking for?" "You are perhaps a tulip fancier. My dear friend, if I am, you must not laugh at me for being so. In the country, people alter. One gets to like, without knowing it, all those beautiful objects that God causes to spring from the earth, which are despised in cities. I was looking anxiously for some iris roots I planted here, close to this reservoir, and which someone has trampled upon this morning. These gardeners are the most careless people in the world. In bringing the horse out to the water, they've allowed him to walk over the border." D'Artagnan began to smile. "Ah, you think so, do you?" And he took his friend along the alley, where a number of tracks like those which had trampled down the flower beds were visible. "Here are the horse's hoofs again. It seems Athos," he said carelessly. "Yes, indeed, the marks are recent." "Quite so," replied the lieutenant. "Who went out this morning?" Athos asked, uneasily. "Has any horse got loose?" "Not likely. answered the Gascon. "These marks are regular." "Where is Raoul?" asked Athos. "How is it that I have not seen him?" "Hush!" exclaimed D'Artagnan, putting his finger on his lips, and he related what he had seen, watching Athos all the while. "Ah, he's gone to Blois, the poor boy. Wherefore? Ah, to inquire after the little La Valliere. She has sprained her foot, you know." "You think he has?" "I am sure of it," said Athos. "Don't you see that Raoul is in love?" "Indeed." "With whom? With a child 7 years old." "Dear friend, at Raoul's age the heart is so expansive that it must encircle one object or another, fancied or real." "Well, his love is half real, half fanciful." "She is the prettiest little creature in the world, with flaxen hair, blue eyes, at once saucy and languishing." "But what say you to Raoul's fancy?" "Nothing. I laugh at Raoul, but this first desire of the heart is imperious. I remember, just at his age, how deep in love I was with a Grecian statue which our good king, then Henry IV, gave my father, insomuch that I was mad with grief when they told me that the story of Pygmalion was nothing but a fable. It is mere want of occupation. You do not make Raoul work, so he takes his own way of employing himself." "Exactly. Therefore I think of sending him away from here." "You will be wise to do so." "No doubt of it, but it will break his heart." So long as 3 or 4 years ago, he used to adorn and adore his little idol, whom he will some day fall in love with in right earnest if he remains here. The parents of little La Valliere have for a long time perceived and been amused at it. Now they begin to look concerned. Nonsense! However, Raoul must be diverted from this fancy. Send him away, or you will never make a man of him. I think I shall send him to Paris. So, thought D'Artagnan, and it seemed to him that the moment for attack had arrived. "Suppose," he said, "we roughly chalk out a career for this young man. I wish to consult you about something." "Do so. Do you think it is time for us to enter the service? But are you not still in the service, you, D'Artagnan? I mean active service. Our former life, has it still no attractions for you? Would you not be happy to begin anew in my society, and in that of Porthos, the exploits of our youth? Do you propose to me to do so, D'Artagnan?" "Decidedly and honestly." "On whose side?" asked Athos, fixing his clear, benevolent glance on the countenance of the Gascon. "Ah, devil take it, you speak in earnest, and must have a definite answer." "Listen, D'Artagnan. There is but one person, or rather one cause, to whom a man like me can be useful, that of the king." "Exactly," answered the musketeer. "Yes, but let us understand each other," returned Athos seriously. "If by the cause of the king you mean that of Monsieur de Mazarin, we do not understand each other." "I don't say exactly," answered the Gascon, confused. "Come, D'Artagnan, don't let us play a sidelong game. Your hesitation, your evasion, tells me at once on whose side you are. For that party no one dares openly to recruit, and when people recruit for it, it is with averted eyes and humble voice." "Ah." "My dear Athos, you know that I am not alluding to you. You are the pearl of brave, bold men. I speak of that spiteful and intriguing Italian, of the pedant who has tried to put on his own head a crown which he stole from under a pillow, of the scoundrel who calls his party the party of the king, who wants to send the princes of the blood to prison, not daring to kill them, as our great cardinal. Our cardinal did, of the miser, who weighs his gold pieces and keeps the clipped ones for fear, though he is rich, of losing them at play next morning, of the impudent fellow who insults the queen. As they say, so much the worse for her, and who is going in 3 months to make war upon us, in order that he may retain his pensions. Is that the master whom you propose to me?" "I thank you, D'Artagnan. You are more impetuous than you were," returned D'Artagnan. "Age has warmed. not chilled your blood. Who informed you this was the master I proposed to you? Devil take it, he muttered to himself. Don't let me betray my secrets to a man not inclined to entertain them. Well, then, said Athos, what are your schemes? What do you propose? Zounds. Nothing more than natural. You live on your estate, happy in golden mediocrity. Porthos has, perhaps, 60,000 francs income. Aramis has always 50 duchesses quarreling over the priest, as they quarreled formerly over the musketeer. But what have I in the world? I have worn my cuirass these 20 years, kept down in this inferior rank, without going forward or backward, hardly half living. In fact, I am dead. Well, when there is some idea of being resuscitated, you say he's a scoundrel, an impudent fellow, a miser, a bad master. By Jove! I am of your opinion, but find me a better one or give me the means of living. Athos was for a few moments thoughtful. Good. D'Artagnan is for Mazarin, he said to himself. From that moment, he grew very guarded. On his side, D'Artagnan became more cautious also. You spoke to me, Athos resumed, of Porthos. Have you persuaded him to seek his fortune? But he has wealth, I believe, already. Doubtless he has. But such is man, we always want something more than we already have. What does Porthos wish for? To be a baron. Ah, true. I forgot, said Athos, laughing. 'Tis true, thought the Gascon. Where has he heard it? Does he correspond with Aramis? Ah! If I knew that he did, I should know all. The conversation was interrupted by the entrance of Raoul. Is our little neighbor worse? Asked D'Artagnan, seeing a look of vexation on the face of the youth. Ah, sir, replied Raoul, her fall is a very serious one, and without any ostensible injury, the physician fears she will be lame for life. This is terrible, said Athos. And what makes me all the more wretched, sir, is that I was the cause of this misfortune. How so? Asked Athos. It was to run to meet me that she leaped from that pile of wood. There's only one remedy, dear Raoul, that is, to marry her as a compensation, remarked D'Artagnan. Ah, sir, answered Raoul, you joke about a real misfortune. That is cruel indeed. The good understanding between the two friends was not in the least altered by the morning's skirmish. They breakfasted with a good appetite, looking now and then at poor Raoul, who with moist eyes and a full heart scarcely ate at all. After breakfast, 2 letters arrived for Athos, who read them with profound attention, whilst D'Artagnan could not restrain himself from jumping up several times on seeing him read these epistles, in one of which, there being at the time a very strong light, he perceived the fine writing of Aramis. The other was in a feminine hand, long and crossed. Come, said D'Artagnan to Raoul, seeing that Athos wished to be alone. Come, let us take a turn in the fencing gallery. That will amuse you. And they both went into a low room where there were foils, gloves, masks, breastplates, and all the accessories for a fencing match. In a quarter of an hour Athos joined them, and at the same moment Charles brought in a letter for D'Artagnan, which a messenger had just desired might be instantly delivered. It was now Athos's turn to take a sly look. D'Artagnan read the letter with apparent calmness and said, shaking his head, See, dear friend, what it is to belong to the army. Faith, you are indeed right not to return to it. Monsieur de Tréville is ill, so my company can't do without me. There. My leave is at an end. Do you return to Paris? Asked Athos quickly. Egad. Yes, but why don't you come there also? Athos colored a little and answered, Should I go, I shall be delighted to see you there. Halloo, Planchet, cried the Gascon from the door. We must set out in 10 minutes, give the horses some hay." Then turning to Athos, he added, "I seem to miss something here. I am really sorry to go away without having seen Grimaud." "Grimaud," replied Athos. "I'm surprised you have never so much as asked after him." "I have lent him to a friend. Who will understand the signs he makes?" returned D'Artagnan. "I hope so." The friends embraced cordially. D'Artagnan pressed Raoul's hand. "Will you not come with me?" he said. "I shall pass by Blois." Raoul turned toward Athos, who showed him by a secret sign that he did not wish him to go. "No, monsieur," replied the young man. "I will remain with Monsieur le Comte." "Adieu, then, to both my good friends," said D'Artagnan. "May God preserve you." As we used to say when we said goodbye to each other in the late cardinal's time. Athos waved his hand, Raoul bowed, and D'Artagnan and Planchet set out. The Count followed them with his eyes, his hands resting on the shoulders of the youth, whose height was almost equal to his own. But as soon as they were out of sight, he said, "Raoul, we set out tonight for Paris." "Eh!" cried the young man, turning pale. "You may go and offer your adieus, and mine to Madame de Saint-Remy. I shall wait for you here till 7. The young man bent low, with an expression of sorrow and gratitude mingled, and retired in order to saddle his horse. As to D'Artagnan, scarcely on his side, was he out of sight when he drew from his pocket a letter, which he read over again. "Return immediately to Paris. J." The epistle is laconic," said D'Artagnan, "and if there had not been a postscript, probably I should not have understood it, but happily there is a postscript." And he read that welcome postscript, which made him forget the abruptness of the letter. P. S. Go to the king's treasurer at Blois, tell him your name and show him this letter. You will receive 200 pistoles. "Assuredly," said D'Artagnan. "I admire this piece of prose. The cardinal writes better than I thought. Come, Planchet, let us pay a visit to the king's treasurer and then set off." "Toward Paris, sir." "Toward Paris." And they set out at as hard a canter as their horses could maintain.